Korean movies were invited and have been screening at this year's Cannes International Film Festival, which has also been shedding light on up-and-coming Korean directors. So what are the local productions that have been showing on the global screen at Cannes? What has been the response from the audience at Cannes? And who are the Korean directors behind the Korean productions at this year's Cannes? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. It's Friday here in Korea, and today we shed light on the big screen as the 76th edition of the Cannes International Film Festival is well underway and scheduled to come to a grand close tomorrow. For more, I have Professor Jae SOH at the Seoul Institute of the Arts. Professor SOH, welcome to the show.
Oh, nice to be back.
I also have film critic Jason Bechervaise, who is a professor now at Kyungdong University. Jason, welcome. It's been a while.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Right. We'll start with you then, Professor SOH. Let's begin with some details about the Korean productions that have been invited to this year's Cannes International Film Festival.
Yes, it's been a lot of films this year. Basically, the Cannes Film Festival is on its 76th edition, and it runs through May 27th. But it basically, this time there were 7 Korean films, out of competition, of course, but this time there are 5 feature films and then 2 student works that have made it to Cannes. And I'm really proud that director Kim Ji-yoon's Cobweb made it to basically the Cannes Film Festival. So that'll be featuring, it's about the story is about basically a film director trying to make his next masterpiece. And there's another film called Hopeless, which is by a first-time director that stars Song Joong-ki, the actor, that's coming out. It's about a kind of a film noir-based thing. And then there's also director Kim Tae-gon's Project Silence, which is sort of like a big disaster film that's happening with Lee Sung-gyun in it. And another film that I like to talk about is basically Sleep, which is directed by Jason Yu. It's also a debut feature, and he's used to be the assistant director to Bong Joon-ho. So it's kind of interesting. And Sleep also has Lee Sung-gyun and Jung Yoo-mi, and it's kind of a horror film that's happening. And then for the 5th film, we have Hong Sang-soo's In Our Day. So that's his 30th feature film, and he's like a favorite at Cannes Film Festival. And the 2 films that have been included as shorts are a film called The Lee Families by Seo Jung-mi from the National University of the Arts, and Hole, directed by Hwang Hae-in, which is another short from the KAFA, which is the Film Academy of Arts. So this year, there's a lot of stuff happening. And then I'd like to add that Blackpink, Jenny's also attending because she's in this HBO series called Idol. So it's going to be kind of a really interesting situation at Cannes with a lot of Koreans.
Right, indeed. And Jason, from the Korean productions that have been invited to the Cannes, which ones are you personally fond of, should I say?
Well, yeah, I mean, Professor Jae SOH has quite rightly mentioned Kim Ji-yoon's Cobweb. Kim Ji-yoon, of course, is one of Korea's great filmmakers. He's made incredible films, A Bittersweet Life, A Foul King, you know, various others over the years. And yeah, and Cobweb does sound like a really intriguing premise. You know, this filmmaker wanted to make his masterpiece in the 1970s, so it's a really interesting backdrop. This is a period where it was actually really difficult to make films because of government censorship. So the so-called golden age of Korean cinema happened in the 1960s, but in the 1970s it had a massive decline. And so filmmakers such as Kim Ki-young, for example, had a really difficult time making movies. And I haven't seen the film myself, but from what I've heard, there is a connection to Kim Ki-young in terms of the character. So I'm very, certainly from the stills I've seen with Song Kang-ho kind of, you know, sporting these kind of big glasses, and, you know, he's a very eccentric director. So yeah, I'm very keen to see that. And yeah, there's an interesting mix of kind of, on the one hand, you've got these established auteurs. So I mentioned Kim Ji-yoon, you've also got Hong Sang-soo with In Our Day, that's his 30th film. So he's incredibly prolific. He remains very much so to this day. The film, you know, it's about a Korean actress, and so, you know, it feels very much, or certainly sounds very much like a Hong Sang-soo film. That's closing director's fortnight. And so we also have some new faces as well, or these younger filmmakers. And a sign of a healthy industry is not just the auteurs, and, you know, quite often in the industry, we talk about, you know, the next Bong Joon-ho, the next Kim Ji-yoon, and, you know, as an educator, I'm very keen to, yes, certainly explain to my students about, you know, well, certainly relay to them, you know, the fondness I have for Korean cinema and directors that have certainly emerged over the last, well, not just last 2 decades, but, you know, over the course of Korean cinema history. But it's also important to kind of raise the next generation. So we have Jason Yu's, as Professor So said, Jason Yu's Sleep. That sounds rather interesting, you know, about this couple who, you know, recently married, and then the Lee Sung-kyun character, he behaves rather strangely when he sleeps. So, and the reviews for that film have been pretty good. That was screening Critics Week, and Kim Jang-hoon's Hopeless, which sounds incredibly violent. It's, I mean, Korean cinema has this kind of reputation for these noir films, these very dark, stylish, gritty thrillers, and that pretty much sounds, from what I read, I didn't read all the reviews, but from what I read, suggested that, you know, that's very much it. If Song Joong-ki, he plays this kind of gangster boss, and he's looking after this 18-year-old or this teenager who has lots of difficulties, and yeah, I think it gets quite violent. So yeah, I'm quite keen to see that. And Project Silence, you know, that continued this tradition in the Cannes Film Festival, whereby a Korean film premieres in the midnight section. This is a kind of genre section of the festival. In competition and even out of competition, you often have these kind of very kind of serious art, social kind of critiques and so the midnight section is an opportunity for kind of critics and those attending the festival to kind of like have a break and enjoy a film. And so this film, it's set on this bridge to Incheon Airport, you know, clouded in fog, and then you have these very strange dogs that kind of emerge and cause havoc. So yeah, and that in terms of the tradition in Cannes for Korean films at midnight, that it was actually Train to Busan that kicked off that trend. So, and since then, since 2016, we've had a Korean film screening in that section every year, and sometimes 2 films actually.
Right, I see. Good to know. Professor, so what would you say are the broader implications of these screening invitations to Korean productions, even as no Korean film, though, is in the competition at the festival this year?
Well, that's right. Usually, you know, competition means basically you are competing for the Palme d'Or, which is the high prize. Last year, Last Decision by Park Chan-wook won the Best Director award. So his film was in competition, and also Song Kang-ho, who's in Cobweb, Kim Ji-yoon's film, won for Best Actor last year as well. So. The implications, I think, you know, they found that they couldn't ignore Korean cinema, but they didn't find the films to be, I guess, worthy of being in competition. But at Cannes, it's not just about winning awards. Of course, you get the maximum amount of exposure for that, but there's uncertain regard, and also Critics Week, as Jason pointed out. There are many different sections. There's even a section by the Directors Association of France that sort of like, you know, basically they have their section to highlight new films. So just being at Cannes, and Cannes is, for those that you have been there, I've never been there, but from what I hear, it's kind of like this crazy festival atmosphere where you have everything from what you see from, say, a Hollywood event to what the French are doing, because Cannes is actually a resort town. So there's a lot of different parties happening everywhere. So it's kind of like a real celebration of cinema, and the French really love their movies. So just to be playing in those, in the festival itself is also like an honor. But I think what's also interesting is there's like around 78 to 80 Korean films that have already been finished. All the post-production's been done on it, but it hasn't really reached the cinemas yet, locally or even internationally. There's also the Cannes market, and there's, I believe, like close to about 15 to 20 Korean films at the market this year to, basically sell abroad as well. Because right now, I'm just kind of jumping ahead, but the cinemas in locally and also internationally aren't doing that well. Everybody's looking at movies through streamers these days, so that's a situation. But just to be in Cannes Film Festival and showcase a lot of your works is an honor, and I think for basically, I hope it really ignites the local audiences to flock to see these movies, because I think the lineup this year at Cannes, all 7 films, including the 2 short films, are really interesting in the scope. The genres are very diverse, and I think it's a time that audiences get crazy about movies again.
Right, hopefully. Jason, you mentioned how Cannes this year is shedding light on up-and-coming directors. Could you tell us a bit more about them, these Korean directors?
Yeah, so I think we talked quite a bit about the features. Certainly, Jason Yu's Sleep, as Professor Sun mentioned, he's worked with Bong Joon-ho. So yeah, I'm very curious to see that film. We also have Hwang Hae's Hole, which actually won an award, Le Cinef, if I pronounce it properly, which is the second prize in Cannes. So that's a CAFA project. So. Yeah, no, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, it's just really important we have this younger generation of filmmakers coming through, and some of them are really young as well. So yeah, we've got these film schools, we've got CAFA, we've got the Korean National University of Arts as well, with the Lee families. So yeah, I'm very keen to see those films. I think, there was some kind of disappointment given that there are no Korean films in competition. It's like, oh no, there's no Korean films in, that can win the Palme d'Or this year. But you know what? It's not, as Professor rightly said, it's not all about winning awards. So, the festival generates a lot of media attention, but also, there's a lot of people from the industry, from the global industry, from, Europe, from Asia, from North America. They kind of descend onto the Croisette. And yeah, it's really important that these films do get exposure. There's a lot of films in the market as well. And it's great. I think it's a sign of a healthy industry. Of course, we do have issues here, given how streaming is kind of upending the whole ecosystem. But I think the fact that we've got 5 features in Cannes, we've got 2 shorts, one of which has won an award. We've got young filmmakers, we've got established auteurs. I think that's great.
Right, and speaking about the media, Professor, I hear Korean productions in Cannes are receiving quite a bit of applause from the audience there. How would you explain this favorable feedback?
Well, Cannes is really famous for those kinds of audience reactions. Usually, they say that if there's an applause that goes on for like 15 minutes, that's a good sign that the movie has really hit a chord with the audiences. And a lot of Korean movies in the past and also this year are getting basically standing ovation, applause at the end of the film. I think it's really, personally, I would be, as a filmmaker, very embarrassed to be receiving clapping for 15 to 20 minutes at a time. But apparently at Cannes, it's a tradition that's always worked. Also, if there's the audience only applauds for 5 minutes, it's actually a sign that the movie didn't do that well as well. So I think the French really love their movies. Just like Korean cinema, French cinema has a very rich history. You have the French New Wave. Basically, it's a system there that really cures towards cineasts and people that love cinema. So Cannes Film Festival is sort of like probably one of the biggest film festivals in the world. There are many other festivals, but I think it's an explosion of different, film cultures with music. There's also a lot of exhibitions that happen, and I mentioned the parties that are really legendary. There are parties that happen. Cannes is basically a town where it's a resort in front of an ocean. So I've heard about parties where you go on a big yacht and you meet and hobnob with basically celebrities and filmmakers. So it's a celebration of that. So I think the fact that Korean cinema is, with Bong Joon-ho's Parasite winning a few years ago, actually it won the Palme d'Or before it won the Academy Awards. But I think Cannes has always had a very good relationship with Korean cinema and always celebrated Korean cinema before Korean cinema became what it is today. So it's like basically, they're really respecting us as a kind of a creative force behind cinema. And I think the fact that a lot of the audiences are ready to enjoy Korean cinema, which shows you the popularity overseas.
Right, of course, indeed. Jason, what are your prospects regarding this year's potential winner of the festival's highest honor, the Palme d'Or?
Oh, that's always a fool's errand. Partly because, certainly I'm not in Cannes, obviously, so I haven't seen the films. But, even just looking at the various jury grids, the jury invariably they're not critics, they're directors and actors. What critics choose invariably is not what, the jury, ultimately decides on. So, the jury this year is headed or presided over by Ruben Östlund. He made this film called Triangle of Sadness, which won that's one of three of his films. So that won the Palme d'Or last year, and he has quite a unique taste, and there has been a trend, I guess, over the last few years where the jury's tended to go for kind of unconventional films. Titane, and of course Triangle of Sadness as well, and even Parasite, and it's a very accessible film, but it's also very innovative. And so I was kind of looking through all the films and which kind of, fits that bill. And Anatomy of a Fall, this is a movie directed by Justin Triet. That's a thriller. It's been received really, really well. And so that's a possibility. We've got Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest, which is set in during the Holocaust, Auschwitz. So that's been received extremely well as well. We've got Todd Haynes' May December, which has been sold to Netflix. The North American rights have for I think $11 million. So I think that will hit the awards circuit later on this year. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Of course, we've got Wes Anderson's Asteroid City, which has got some really polarizing kind of reactions out there. So some have just raved about it, others have been less keen. That's actually being released in Korea, I think, in June. We've also got Ken Loach. He's won the Palme d'Or twice so he's got The Old Oak, which I think screens today. I don't see the jury going for him for his latest film, partly because he's won twice, but also looking at the jury. So, you know what? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Right, time will tell us that. Meanwhile, beyond Cannes, Professor, so here in Korea, as you mentioned earlier, industry insiders, they've been lamenting the doldrums at local theatres. First of all, then, how do you explain this trend?
Well, we had COVID, basically, and a lot of people stopped coming to theaters. Of course, during the COVID period, which was, for about 2 years, the theaters were open at 50% capacity. And yet, I think people were a little afraid of catching, COVID there. So, and then, as Jason mentioned, we have all the different streamers, like basically Netflix, Disney Plus, Wave, and all the local stuff. So people started to watch these things at home, including movies, instead of just dramas or serials. But what I found, which was unfortunate, was that when we opened up again last year and the last year, beginning of this year, they raised the prices of the tickets at the theaters. So again, just the fact that it doubled in price, it basically made a lot of people kind of stay away. And so right now the situations, except for one local film, basically Roundup, which was Roundup 2, that was over 10 million at the box office. A lot of Korean films have done really poorly at the box office. And I think people basically go to see like big, blockbuster movies, basically like Avatar, things like that, because, it's something you don't watch on the streamers. You want to watch it in full, 4DX with, Dolby surround sound in the theater. So that's sort of the trend. I think it's going to take a little time for people to come back to the theaters, but I think I'm hopeful because, in different countries, there are a lot of theater chains all over the country and bigger mass, but Korea is a very small country and we have relatively a lot of theater space. And I think eventually people will basically include that back to to like 2019 standards. But a lot of industry people are a little negative about whether cinema will, go back to its, over 10 million at the box office type of situation again because of the streamers existing. So I think in the future we'll have to kind of come up with a new plan, new business model, because the industry itself is now really transformed where basically, you can't even get funding for films because it costs too much money to put the movies in the theaters. It costs too much money to basically pay for P&A costs and basically, people are now staying at home to watch the movies. So I hope that we find some sort of solution and, because I really love watching it in a theater full of people.
Right, me too, me too. Meanwhile, Jason, there are pundits, though, who claim that the fate of movie theatres, it's been up in the air for quite a while. Do you agree? And what do you propose to better tackle this situation?
Yeah, I think we're in a point of transition. And so, I mean, Bong Joon-ho, when Okja was released, I was at the press conference, and he was asked about the industry, and obviously Okja was a Netflix film. It premiered in Cannes, and theaters didn't want to screen it, and that was true here in Korea. It was actually barred from the multiplexes. And he said it was similar to what happened in the 1970s. So you have kind of television coming in, and how there are kind of similarities between what happened then and what's happening now. And the industry, Hollywood cinema responded. You have the new Hollywood generation, Spielberg, Scorsese. They're able to kind of bring people back into the cinema. George Lucas, of course. And I think when it comes to what's happening right now, certainly I think the streamers are a threat. But that being said, though, I think there are some encouraging signs in Cannes, actually, because we've got Scorsese's film Killers of the Flower Moon, which premiered there to rave reviews. It's an Apple film, but it's actually being released through Paramount in the United States. And Tim Cook was there in Cannes, which I think, the optics there are encouraging. And Bob Iger from Disney as well. So they're releasing Indiana Jones. And so Disney Plus is a streaming service that is struggling to make money. And so it was all about numbers. It was all about the number of subscribers. But the thing is, investors are realizing now that actually Netflix is actually making quite a bit of money, but the other streaming companies are not. They're losing money. And so they're kind of going back to the kind of traditional kind of theatrical kind of release windows. And so that's what we're seeing with Disney, that's what we're seeing with Warner Brothers. And so you could, yeah, sure, Korea maybe is certainly it's, in terms of the theatrical admissions, it is concerning. And there are lots of cinemas here, there are lots of films that, that are waiting to be released. It's just trying to get people back, trying to entice people back into the cinema, not just for these, these big kind of blockbusters that have done very well over the last 12 months or so. Top Gun, Avatar, and of course, Confidential Assignment, and also The Roundup. So I think, that there is some optimism there that wasn't there before. I don't see Korea being the only country where people don't go to the cinema. We're seeing signs of a recovery in the United States. We're seeing signs of a recovery in France. So, yes, so watch this space.
Right. And given what Jason, our Professor Bechervaise, of course, has just said, Professor, so very briefly speaking, is there a way for movie theatres and streaming platforms to work together, do you think? We have like about a minute left. Yeah,
well, basically Jason mentioned it. You have to go back to the model of, basically a lot of the streamers want exclusivity and world premiere. They want to basically just release something all at once. But I think the way to make it a healthy environment is to actually release it in theaters first and give it a time, like maybe a month to 6 months. I'm probably saying it's too long for a lot of people, and then go to the streamers afterwards. But a lot of the streamers have always had sort of they wanted to show it from the beginning. For example, there's a movie called Dune, big blockbuster movie. And, they wanted to show that on HBO Max. It's a Warner Brothers film. Right. And the directors and a lot of the actors really fought against it, and they released it in the theaters. And actually, it did really well. So they're making Dune, the second part of that movie, and it's going to go theatrical as well. So I think another movie would be Top Gun Maverick was another thing that Paramount wanted to show on their streamers. But Tom Cruise's clout pushed them to go theatrical, and it's a good thing because Paramount made a lot of money with Maverick. Right, so, we're going to have to find a way where we kind of balance what theaters do and what streamers do.
Right. All right, Professor, so as always, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, and Jason, Professor Bechervaise here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you for having me.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Issues and Insiders. We're looking ahead to a long weekend. So for those of you who have yet to make big plans, a visit to local theatres may be one option. Have a great weekend. See you next week.